Hello, everybody. Welcome to our week one in our new series, Through the Line of Jesus. I am joined here by some new guests, Connor and Asha. Welcome.
Oh.
This is my brother and his wife, my sister-in-law. So why don't you guys do a brief introduction, tell us a bit about yourself, your life journey. I like to say on this podcast, we're all normal Christians. You don't have any expertise as a Christian that other people don't have, so feel free to share.
That wasn't in the preparation questions you sent to us about myself. So
well, I got you. This should be the easy question.
I'm the youngest brother. I guess I would say I'm the most artistic one versus everybody else being sporty. Let's see. Moving out to Arizona. There's that.
Why don't you guys expand on why would you move out to Arizona?
Oh, so we're going. You want to talk?
You got it.
So, we're moving out to Arizona to help start a church and be part of the launch team,
which is so cool.
We've been helping from. I'm not going to dox ourselves. We've been helping from where we're at, and with like graphic design stuff and other needs that they're looking for, and so eventually we'll be moving out there to live. So
this is very cool. Asha, a bit about yourself.
Let's see. I'm married to Connor. I'm a twin. That's a fun fact. I'm one of 6 kids, big family also, so love that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I knew we were going to bring up the...
I make teeth for a living.
There you go. Work at a dentist office. That's a good elevator pitch. I make teeth.
Yeah.
What'd you do today?
Yeah, I made a crown for Dad today.
There you go. Have you ever seen a tattoo on a crown?
No, but I did have someone request to have their crowns made blue to match their eyes.
There you go. My mother-in-law has a tattoo on her crown because she has a friend who was able to do that for her. So that'd be something new for you to see.
Yeah.
I told Asha to sign her initials on Dad's tooth, but she didn't.
Hey, HERPA violation. Let's not call out Dad for his medical procedures.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. Okay. So as you can tell, this will be a fun podcast. As you can tell from Connor and Asha's personalities, we're going to enjoy this. And I know exactly how to poke them to get reactions. So we'll have fun. For those that kind of missed the intro week, this is called the Through the Line of Jesus. And this is actually the first Bible study that I put together for my small group because it was really out of desperation because each week I was in charge of like coming up with a topic. And some weeks I had something in mind but there were some days it was like 30 minutes till people showing up and I'm like Googling small group ideas and like freaking out because I don't have something to talk about. So I got tired of that. So I was like, why not just make up my own thing? And so how I got that idea was I looked at Matthew, which is what we're going to start at. And there's a whole bunch of names. And I was like, hey, you can make a study out of just going through all the names. So you guys got Matthew 1 open?
Yep.
All right, Connor, this first question goes to you. I think this is the correct question for you. What do you normally do when you're reading the Bible and you get to Matthew 1:2?
So I used to skip it until high school when I felt convicted. Because I'm like, if I was in the Bible and people skipped over my name, I'd feel really sad. But I'm not in the Bible. So, but I still read them. I don't, like Kaylee said in one of the first episodes, she doesn't really pronounce the names. She goes,
yeah.
And so.
But you force yourself not to just skip past the whole passage. You're like, let me at least eyes to the line.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And after reading some of the Old Testament and stuff, it's really cool to see names that you recognize. But then you got some people in there that you don't recognize, and you're like, okay, well,
Who were you?
At least he made it in.
Yep.
You know?
So I think very honest answer, and I think a lot of people are still in pre-high school you, which is just I'm just gonna who blah 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 blah. Because I think most people are kind of looking for that. What's the Bible gonna speak to me today? And a list of names
Mhm.
typically doesn't do that. And our aim is
I
for
went through
exactly
this.
what you said. No, what's up?
I said I went through the same kind of mentality with I was reading Deuteronomy and
Leviticus.
Numbers and Leviticus, and it's basically that, but with laws. And so it's
Yeah.
like, did he say that law already? So still trying to pay attention, still trying to read the same things.
You're not
Yeah.
counting out each one till you get to 613?
No,
Mhm.
Okay. Um, so that's our goal. We're going to kind of study a lot of these names so that way, like Connor said, names will start to pop when you get to here. So that way you don't feel like you have to skip by. You'll be like, Abraham fathered Isaac. Oh yeah, I remember that relationship. And things will pop. So we'll hit 13 kind of people. There's a few areas that there's gaps where the Bible doesn't like spend a lot of time on those characters, and I'll do some bonus episodes and kind of do those filler areas for like from this person to this person. We don't have a lot, but here's the names. Here's what we do know, what the names might mean. So we'll have some bonus episodes to fill those in. And we get pretty good coverage up until we get to the kings. I kind of group a bunch of the kings together because most of them are just bad kings. So after Solomon, I just group a bunch of them together until you get to Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel he was a kid when he was taken into exile to Babylon, but and then he came back with Ezra. So he wasn't ever really a king, but he was in that line. And then we don't really have from Zerubbabel on the rest of those people. And Zerubbabel also has different names, so it might be different in Matthew. There's Zerubbabel. So we won't hit every name, but a lot of them we will. And there's a lot that you can get out of this. So thank you for your honesty on that question. Asha, would you have answered differently?
No. But no, I think I would agree. I think in the same way, knowing that like each thing in the Bible, like there's a specific reason why it's in it.
Mm-hmm.
So like skipping over it, you might be missing something. So,
Sure.
and two, it's just cool to see everything connect later on.
Yep.
I don't know if we're gonna get to this point, but I did hear why they included them. So if you want me to wait, talk about it.
Included
Or
what?
say it now. All the names in the beginning
Tell me.
of Matthew. Okay, so from my understanding, Matthew was like very detail oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when it comes to Jewish customs, um, your lineage is very, very important. So for him to justify Jesus being the Messiah and being the son of David and being of the line of Abraham, he had to say the names, which is as much as I know about that.
Yep.
Doesn't make it more fun to read, but it makes it better.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of detail orientated, he actually explains it afterwards, is he's organized them into groups of 14 generations. So does Abraham 14 generations, David 14 generations, exile 14 generations. And what's actually interesting is people will point out an error where when he goes to the exile, there's actually three kings that we know about from Chronicles and Kings that he leaves out of mention just to keep that 14 generations. But he kind of skipped over some really bad kings. One of them was okay. So he's just kind of like, don't worry about them, just so he could keep his 14 14s. But
Yeah.
I like the genealogy in Matthew because it goes like in order the way that makes sense in my brain. But that only goes back to Abraham. And this week we're starting off with Adam and Eve. So where'd that come from? Well, if you go over to Luke's account, he starts at Mary and Joseph and works backwards all the way up. And they actually one's following Joseph's line, the other's following Mary's line, but they merge at Solomon. So once you get to Solomon, they're the same. So there's some other interesting quirks Like you could, most people skip past lists and names, but like if you spend time studying it, you get a lot out of it. So,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and I've been thinking on this stuff and doing studies on it for a few years now. So, got a lot. Okay, we are jumping back to Genesis for our first characters, Adam and Eve. And for those of you that are joining us on this, I'll show it off here and then I'll link in the description. But we do have Bible study sheets for you guys. Those are free. Everything's free. You can print them off online or just kind of use it to make your own notes. Um, but sort of what the focus of this one was is focusing as like a character study. So when we look at these people, what do we notice were their strengths, their weaknesses, what resonates with each person? It's going to be different for me than for Connor and Asha, which is why I like to do these things in groups. And so I would say, question for you guys. Did you guys stick with reading Genesis 2 through 3, or did you start in Genesis 1?
We started in 1 and went to 4.
Perfect. I think
Mhm.
I need to update my thing. When I first started these, I didn't feel like making people read too much, but I have changed
Mm.
since then. And now I'm like, no, read it all. So always feel free to read more than what I write. So why don't we start with Genesis 1, because that lays the foundation for all of human and creation. And just kind of, I wanted to get your ideas for how you've grown up thinking about Genesis 1, maybe how you think of it now and what shifted there, and kind of start off with that.
You wanna start?
Mm. I'll say when I think of Genesis 1, at least growing up, it was like I remember being in Sunday school and they had these like stickers, and it was like, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And we had like a picture of heaven, and then we had a little earth thing. Um, and so I think I always pictured it as like
Stickers.
stickers.
Ah.
Yeah. Um, but I think it's cool, like as an adult, of like being able to be in God's creation.
Mhm.
Like it's more of like a bigger picture now, and not just like, okay, it was this and there was this
Mhm.
and then there was this and there was this, but you kind of just see like the whole picture kind of blossom. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think a
I
lot of
think
people are stuck in the kids' book mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I can think about my daughter's little kid Bible. And it's like in the beginning there was nothing. It's just like a black circle for Earth. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and so you kind of have these like immature images, and sometimes we don't update those as we get older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I started out just being like, okay, yeah, literally taking Genesis literally. Day one, God made heavens and the earth. Okay, day two, he separated light from dark. Anyways, going through all of that and taking it literally, and then as an adult, I'm like, there's so many other interpretations of Genesis.
Mhm.
Which one's correct? I'm like, does it matter? Yes. Does the answer being correct matter? And I feel like as long as you understand that all of this was created by God, whether you believe in evolution or not, you can't disprove that there's a creator
Mhm.
and that he, like, I don't know. Because, like, I've heard that it's a poem, but it being a poem doesn't necessarily make it false either. So it's like, I don't
Mhm.
know. So I'm kind of like, um,
And I think people get the wrong idea when a normal person hears, "Oh, it's a poem." What they think you're saying is there's nothing real about it. It's just someone writing
yeah.
nice words. But
Mm-hmm.
large parts of the Bible are poetic, meaning that they're kind of
Mhm.
structuring how they do things. And so I'm going to do a little teaser for sort of the structure that you can see in Genesis 1. Not that I'm the expert on it, but just so that you guys can kind of like hear a few things that maybe are new. And then if people who are listening are like, that sounds really interesting, I want to learn more, I can give you guys some resources. But So you mentioned, so the first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. First thing, we've carried over that word heavens just from the King James, but it literally just means skies. So I think most people think it's saying like God formed like what we picture as the pearly gates heaven, but it's just like the skies. So you can interpret it as in the beginning, God created the skies and the earth. But that whole first sentence, like Connor, you accidentally attributed that to day one. We don't get to day one in a second. But that first verse, when you look at the Hebrew, is actually just a heading, not an actual action. So it's like, hey, here's what we're going to talk about. When God created the heavens and the earth, that's our title. And then you start the actual action. And so I think in our modern day sense, where we all have the idea of a big bang and there's a start to the universe, people read that as like describing the first thing that happened. Whereas when this was written, there wasn't really an idea of like a big bang. So like what their beginning stuff looked like was very different. Where that people get the poetic or poem things for Genesis 1 is actually really cool. So you have 6 days where God's doing stuff, and there's a really cool pattern with those 6 days. So days 1 through 3, I'm going to kind of use my palm to illustrate this without cutting off the mic. So let me use this. Okay, if for those that are watching. So days 1 through 3, it's actually structured. Oh, hey, recognize my hi. Day 1, he separates does the lights, so the heavens. He does the lights, the skies, and then the earth and sea. So it's kind of going from top down. And then there's a lot of language that matches this first one to the bottom one. So there's like symmetry top to bottom, with the middle being sort of like the center of that little poetic structure. And let's see, I think it's day 3. There's like a little bonus creation in day 3. So it's like creation, 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 little bonus in day 3. You go over to days 4 through 6, and so it matches up to the days 1 through 3. Day 1 was the lights in the sky. And so day 4 is the stars, moon, and that sort of stuff to govern the skies. Then you get the birds and the ocean animals. And then you get the creatures. Boom, there's a bonus, humans. So you kind of see how there's a matching symmetry over here, symmetry that way. So there's a lot of symmetry using threes within that 6 day narrative. It's a lot easier to see some of those symmetries when you have like the original language. You guys use what Bible version are you using?
ESV.
ESV. I know some Bible versions, if there's a lot of repetition, they'll try to use a different word so it doesn't feel repetitive. But like the original Hebrew is using repetition for you to notice patterns. So if you're interested in like
ESV, I think they try to be as literal as possible.
more literal,
like as much as the Hebrew. So I think it does the alliterations.
okay. And I think NIV is on more of the interpretive, let it make sense. Yeah. Mine sort of kind of picks between the two for whichever passage it thinks does best. It's the Christian Standard. So I've been enjoying that this year. So there is a lot of structure there, and it's really cool. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, it's a bit of a deep dive, but Bible Project has free classes. They're like seminary level classes. They're free online, and they have a Genesis beginning, and they go through that whole structure, and they show you little images, and they'll actually help you understand, hey, at the time like this was written, what was like in the mindset of people? Like in our mindset, we have Big Bang Theory. What was the mindset of people then? And things start to make a lot more sense. So if you're interested. Cool. Anything you want to talk about in Genesis 1 before we get to our main characters?
You had a note. You said that. I wrote it down.
Maybe you'll see. I don't.
Do you want me to say it?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, you don't have to say it.
The one thing I want to point out in verse 26, so all of creation, all the animals are described as having the breath of life. So when God breathes into Adam, that's not different than what the animals have. But in verse 26, it talks about how man is made in his image. They will rule the fish, the sky. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. So man, which is inclusive, female, were made in God's image. What does that mean? The word image there would be like what you and I would think of the word idol later on. So it's like a representation, not it's a representation of a thing, but it's not as complete as that thing. So we represent some part of God. Obviously, we just can't show all of it. So that's what an image is. And that's going to crop up a lot in terms of what's the purpose of man to be an image of God. And what does that mean? That's what you read the Bible for. Cool. All right. Genesis 2, diving into some Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. Why don't we talk about anything you guys had thoughts on, questions on, or noticed prior to the fall? So Garden of Eden, prior to the fall. Do you guys have any notes that you had about that section?
I would say God didn't just make Adam and have him like sit around. I like that he gave him a task.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty cool. It's like, all right, you figure something out. He's like, no, I have a job for you. Go name all the animals. So
Mhm.
that's, I don't know how long Adam was doing that before Eve came around. It came around, but I'm assuming long enough for him to get tired of doing it alone.
Yeah.
And God's like, oh, okay, here you go. So
That also shapes how I think heaven or like what life is like after we die. Because it's like, I don't just want to be sitting in a cloud with angels dropping grapes in my mouth and I'm just relaxing for eternity. Like, what's my job? What's my task? What do I get to do? I want to explore more, learn more. Like, and so I feel like that's how God created this ideal situation is that there's work, there's tasks, there's things to do. And that's what I think, whatever the afterlife looks like, heaven, whatever, that's a bigger topic. I think there'll be tasks and things to do. In my mind, it's like we're just kind of getting Earth 2.0, and it's like, hey, let's do better rockets and let's travel the universe and explore God's beautiful creation and be super smart. And God's like, you got it, guys.
This time we can go to Jupiter and not get crushed.
Exactly. I would love that. So that's my vision for what heaven's like, space travel without dying. So
what did I say? I liked so the key verses we read Mark 10:6. And something that I liked reading Genesis and Mark was that like
you want to read Mark if you got it pulled up?
Get it from Speed Drills.
Speed Drills. I'm a bit of an expert on Mark.
Yeah. Mark 10:6. I think I need to plug in this computer. You read Mark 10:6 and I'll go get
Mark 10 verse 6 says, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Okay, that's it. Okay,
For
maybe it
this
wasn't worth
reason,
10, but
man will leave his father and mother, and the two will become one flesh. Like, this is
Mhm.
where I should have referenced more than one verse, but
Yeah, that's okay. But I liked the connection of like with reading
mhm.
Genesis and like God talking about creation. Um, and just the way of like whether it's like fruit and like how I don't remember if it was in Genesis, but it was talking, I think he was talking to Adam and saying that like the fruit will have seeds and
Mhm.
that will produce more fruit.
Mhm.
And same with like male and female, like you need male and females to recreate,
Mhm.
more people and like everything that he created is to create more
Right.
Things. And so I thought that was really cool. I think I had never necessarily heard the verse of him like talking about the fruit, something so simple and small. But
Mhm.
then I feel like that just kind of unlocked a lot for me of like, man, everything he creates literally kind of creates itself.
Right.
Like whether
It's
so
like
I thought that was super cool.
recreation happening all over.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're made in his image, that's kind of like the whole idea is we kind of do that
Mm-hmm.
recreation. I'm going to jump ahead. I
For
think it's
your
in chapter 4, but you're kind of hitting at it. And this was something I wanted to point out. Um, so in chapter 4, we jump to, all right, we're out of the garden. We move on to Cain and Abel. So not a lot of screen time from Adam and Eve, but in verse 1, you see Eve say she conceives and gave birth to Cain. And then she has a quote.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I have made a male child with the Lord's help. So there you see the emphasis is on I have done something. So in her
Mm-hmm.
mindset, she's now creating, like she's kind of like putting
Mm-hmm.
herself, and God helped me. And then, of course, you get
Yeah.
that disastrous story. And then when you jump ahead to verse 25, they have Seth. And then her quote is, God has given me another offspring. So you can kind of see that
Mm-hmm.
attitude change in Eve, where she thought, like, I can recreate. No, through God, he
Mm-hmm.
creates. So,
Yeah.
I feel like going back to what Asha said, that it kind of proves your two
mhm,
sandwich things. So I just went quickly and looked. I think the third thing that God created on the first 3 days,
mhm,
the third one was fruit. And I think on the sixth day,
mhm.
is that when God created man on the sixth day, or is that
Sixth
also the
day.
fourth?
Yeah,
So there's your
there you go.
parallels, like the reproduction. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's going to be important because fruit, as you would say, or seed, as was kind of typically translated, becomes a big theme that's going to go throughout the rest of the Bible, and we're going to be following that. We'll get to that in a second. The Here's a little thing I noticed and want to get your guys' thought on. So it's describing the Garden of Eden, which it's a garden in Eden, which I didn't picture it growing up. There's like the land of Eden, and within Eden, there's a
Mhm.
garden. And this
Okay.
something Bible Project points out is like you have these like layers of like here's the garden, here's Eden, here's the world. You have these concentric circles, which is the same as like
Mm-hmm.
the temple, outer courts, inner courts, holy of holies.
What?
Yeah, see, I
Mm,
gotcha. So
that's
That's
you
cool.
see a lot of symmetry like that where you have those sort of regions. So, and if you thought that was cool, just start listening to Bible Project podcast. They like blow your mind with this stuff. But
Mm.
okay.
so it's describing the garden, and it talks about, and in the middle is the tree of life, and
Mhm.
also the tree of knowing good and evil. So those two trees are both in the middle. So anytime you're going to the tree of life, you're passing by the tree of knowing good and evil, the tree you're not supposed to eat from. And so my sort of takeaway from that, from like what Adam and Eve had to do, is because the tree is really just a test. Are you going to choose for yourself to decide what's good and eat, good and bad, or are you going to let God teach you what's good and bad. And so they have a daily decision to put their trust in God. And so likewise, we have a daily decision. Am I going to put my trust in God and what he knows is good or what I think is good?
I have a note that says if they would have eaten the tree of knowledge and then eaten from the tree of life, they would have been sinful forever, aka separated from God forever. They would have been like essentially sent, like destined for hell without any, like, I don't know if that's theologically accurate, but
Well,
I've
in
gotten
my
that.
mind, you eat from the tree of life continually,
Yeah.
and that keeps you alive. And so him banishing them was you no longer get that. Um, so I don't think it was like a one-time eat,
Gotcha.
but I don't think it's specific. That's just what's in my head. But that is the logic that God gives for banishing them. He's like, they can't both know good and evil and live forever. Is that at the end of Genesis 3? We're already jumping into the fall, so let's kind of jump into that. And this is where I really want to get Osh's take on it, because the story of the fall, I feel like growing up was always focused on Eve making mistakes, and I just want to know what that did for growing up as a girl. Did that do anything? And then has that shifted over time? Like, how have you perceived this story as you've grown up? Because us guys can just go, it wasn't really our fault.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say it's like for me growing up, if I was like, oh man, like women, we make men sin, or however you want to say that. There's probably a better way to say that.
Probably.
But I would say I think it was more just like when it comes to, how do I want to say this? I think for me, when I thought of Eve growing up, it was more like, oh, she did this. Now we have to deal with this. Not necessarily like all women are like that.
Gotcha.
But I think I don't know. I think it just shows, at least with Eve, and when it comes to the fall, of being deceived, like it's just human nature of like, it's kind of like a domino effect. If you can do it, then you can get someone else to do it, and then get someone else to do it. And yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but if you have
You
anything
did
to
say
add to
something
that.
when we were reading this and you popped off and you kind of went, it's something your dad preached about. Do you remember? Who actually sinned first?
Who sinned first?
Yeah.
Eve.
It wasn't Eve. It wasn't Eve. Where was Adam when Eve took a bite and listened to the serpent?
Oh, he was right next. What?
Yeah, Adam was right next to her.
Yeah.
What'd he do?
He ate it.
Yeah, he didn't say anything.
Yeah.
He knew. You popped off last night.
Well, here's the thing. I don't remember.
Oh.
I feel like it's better when you're like reading. You're like, oh man, this is so good.
She was like, see, it's men's fault. Boom.
All right, so we'll have to start doing the podcast live as we read. Get those live reactions. Yeah, that was pointed out. The first sin was the sin of omission. That, and you can tell by her response, is like, Adam, you clearly didn't tell her correctly, because she's like, oh, you can't even touch it. It's like, God never said that. So she's adding to it. It's not clear. And Adam's just like, I don't know. I guess you just talk to that snake. I'll just hang out. I think that's one of the biggest applications for me from Adam is, hey, don't just stand by and let things happen without you stepping in and, protecting or saying what you know or any of that.
When do we start talking about their strengths and weaknesses? Is that
Right now.
here or during? Oh, sweet.
Let me say one thing first, and then we'll go into strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
Because this is another one of those patterns where when it gets pointed out to you, you'll see it throughout the rest of the Bible. I'm trying to think of an example that we won't run into. I'll probably think of one. But so the language gets repeated all throughout the Bible in all sorts of different stories. But the simple language is Eve sees the fruit. So the word like sees it, sees that it's good, and takes it for herself. So those sorts of terminologies are going to get played out in different roles, and the role of the deceiver, the snake, the woman, like those different roles are going to get played out. You see it first with the Cain and Abel story where Cain now sees that his brother is getting something he's not and goes to take it for himself. So that is just repeating the same sin cycle. Just now there's not an external serpent, it's a sin within his heart. So like how you view it shifts with each time they tell this story over and over again. Um, so keep your eye out for that, and you'll see it pop up with all the different characters we look at. Now we can go to strengths and weaknesses.
Okay. Which one do you want me to start with? Strengths or weaknesses?
I think strengths explain your weaknesses.
Okay.
So I would do strengths first. And you can start with
I think for Adam, I guess, and Eve, one of their strengths is that they are made in the image of God. And God said that it was good, so they're made well,
Very good.
Well, they were
for that
perfect
last
in the
day.
beginning.
Yeah, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I did write very good.
Mm-hmm.
Another strength is that God gave him leadership, like dominion over the earth. So like he put him in charge of things. So Adam had at least I guess and Eve, because we're both have dominion. They had dominion over the earth. They had authority.
Mm-hmm. I think another strength, at least for Eve, is that like God made her to be a helper. And I think like I feel like that's also a responsibility in itself of like even just I don't know if this can be a marriage thing, but even in marriage of like wanting to be a helper for Connor of like making sure like whether it's like praying for him or like things like that, like I may not make all the decisions. He might make a decision, but like in some decisions, I think the Lord has at least me here just to be an encouragement to him of like whether he second guesses something or whatever. Like I think even with Adam of having to name all of the animals and he had a big job, and so to have someone to be there and say like hey like you're doing great or hey that's a great name or hey why would you name this animal like a Tyrannosaurus Rex? I don't know, but he did, and she probably encouraged him through it. So I think that that's
and it's
at least a strength
all these years.
Yeah. But
You brought up you guys are good at reminding me things about things to bring up. You brought up it describes the creation when Eve's being created as being a helper, which you seem fine with, but there's certain people in the world who see that and like, oh, unbelievable, we're just a helper. So I think it's important to note that that word that's being translated as helper, the person who gets most described using that word is God. Like it's not just like a little, oh, you're my little helper. It's like what you would describe as like, hey, we need help, and here comes a king with his armies to save you in battle. That sort of helper.
So I'm basically a queen with my armies to save you.
Queen's the most important piece in chess. Maybe.
Yep.
There you go.
So, not to diminish any roles there, not to elevate
Yeah.
above, but it's
Mhm.
important to note that this isn't trying to put down women in any sort of a way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
people could easily use that terminology there as a way
Mhm.
to do that. So,
Yeah.
the discussion about man, woman, submit, love, all that's for a different time.
Hmm.
I'll have Dad on for that one.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. I guess going on to weaknesses.
Mhm.
For as a
Mhm.
joke, we wrote Dusty because they were
Dusty.
made from dust. Yeah.
In the dust they
Um,
shall return.
But and looking at how they were convinced to sin
Mhm.
in ways that their kids ended up sinning, it looked like they had kind of some insecurity. And that's kind
Mhm.
of how the serpent got to them. It's
Mhm.
like, did God say this? If like maybe you would be like a god if you ate this, like
Mhm.
saying that they're not already kind of like God. So like then they start feeling insecure. And then when Cain and Abel did their shenanigans, uh, who killed who?
Cain killed Abel.
Cain was insecure about his
His offering.
offering,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so then he actually only went initially probably to talk to Cain or Abel,
Hmm.
and then it got to a point where he got so insecure that he killed him,
Hmm.
and then he hid his body and then lied to God. He's like, I don't know where's that.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I'm not
And
his
so-
keeper.
Yeah.
So I think that insecurity is passed down
Mhm.
to their children. Um, yeah, and I'm sure like Adam watching Eve eat the fruit, and he's like, "Well, what does she get? Something that I don't get?
Right.
Insecurity."
Yep.
You know.
Mhm.
So, and that's kind of like not trusting in God, like putting your trust in God daily. You're not secure in Him, so you're insecure. Kind of what you said earlier.
Full circle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I like your word better than what I said. So, insecurity. Cool. I think we're running about 45 minutes. So I want to move to what's my favorite part of these, which is the foreshadowing of Christ.
Mhm.
And we'll see kind of what you guys had, and I'll kind of give another good resource for people if you're curious about what foreshadowing of Christ could look like. If the words Christophany doesn't mean anything to you, or typology doesn't mean anything to you, I'll give you a good series to listen to. So, what do you guys see as foreshadowings of Christ? I got plenty to share. Please.
I'll let you talk some more.
You start.
Okay. So Adam was the world's first husband, and Corinthians, First Corinthians, maybe, I don't know. Paul talks about the husband being like Christ to the church,
Mhm.
and so like Adam in his first role was kind of a representation of Jesus. There's
Mm.
that one. I felt like that one was a little bit easier on the nose. Like first husband, they say that, but I feel like there's something else. I'm like with his role and having like naming of the animals that like or dominion over the animals that reflects to Christ. I just can't piece it in my brain. Like I feel like his job also reflects Christ somehow.
Mhm.
Probably right. I have to think on how the
Yeah.
naming could get translated into something. Good, good, good.
Something else I think that stuck out to us was that, like, I can't remember where we read this, and maybe it was one of the key verses, but one of the things we wrote down was like Adam was, or if you do first Adam, second Adam, the first Adam like became a living being, whereas like the second Adam, who is Jesus, like gave life. And so I don't remember how we connected that, but
They both had to do with life. One of them was given life, and then his sin took life, and then the other one gives life
By giving up his life.
by giving up his life, kind of like redeeming Adam.
Yeah.
Making the decision Adam couldn't, which is following God's decisions and not your own selfish ones.
Yeah.
Last note.
Very good, very good. So if you guys look at chapter 3, verse 15, we get our first prophecy in the Bible. So he's laying out the curses, and he starts by cursing the serpent. So here's verse 15. I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. So that last little phrase there. So the devil, the enemy, is always going to be trying to strike the heel of the seed of the woman, and the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the snake. So as we read on through the Bible, you start to look for, hey, is this going to be the human that finally crushes the head of the snake, defeats evil? So you can read the rest of the Bible with this in mind. Is this the person? And you get to the person who's like Abraham. You're like, ooh, Abraham, that's pretty good. Or Noah. They always start off like really promising. And then, of course, they have a shortcoming and they fail. And you're like, oh, well, maybe the next time. And so you're constantly looking for this until you get to the end of the Old Testament. You're just like, I don't think a human can do it. And then in walks Jesus. So who crushes the head as he gets struck in the heel. So prophecy fulfills. Adam's curse deals with, he has to deal with thorns and thistles. And so you guys talked about how Jesus kind of took the place and sacrificed himself with literal thorns and thistles being placed on his head during the sacrifice. So taking on that curse literally.
Yeah.
And then verse 21, as they were leaving, it says that God made them clothes from a lamb or animal skin, goat, remember. But in order to do that, you'd have to kill the animal. So it was the first sacrifice was made to cover their shame or sin. So our sin requires sacrifice.
Nice snap to that.
You can snap to that.
Thanks. So good.
A lot of my people in my cohort going through my master's class, they were snappers. Oh, so good. It's like
it's better than clapping. Clapping might be a little too loud. So snaps
it is. It is. I've been doing it now.
I'm a clapper.
Well, okay. I'm out of major notes, I think. You guys got anything else?
I think we just have one that we didn't touch on. It was just like, this might be a parallel or foreshadowing of Christ. Let me see. Oh no, it was not.
I think it was a comparison.
It was, this one's not.
Oh.
It just said like death came from the sin of man, and then that also is passed down to his kids and so on. Like, I think that's talked about somewhere else in the Bible as like generational sins, but like that kind of goes with the insecurity thing we talked about. I think that's all we really have left.
A personal application.
Maybe we also have personal application.
All right. I had two final notes. One, I mentioned if you were interested in those foreshadowing of Christ and you want a good series, Bible Thinker has a great series on Jesus in the Old Testament. Anybody would love that series. He does podcasts, or those are on video. I think I linked it in the last episode. I'll link it below. And then I wanted to highlight one more thing. So one of the curses he gives to the woman is he will intensify your labor pains. I've heard people
Yeah.
point out, and I'm not sure where I land on this, but looking at the language, you could also interpret it as you can have difficulty in conceiving. And when you look at the rest of Genesis, that kind of makes sense because it's constantly people struggling to conceive. And so I think that might be a viable translation worth considering.
Or both.
Or both. And sometimes they do that. They do a lot of play on words. I was just reading in my Bible reading plan, it was the Joseph interprets the dreams. And he's like, and your head will be lifted up off of your body. You're getting hung. Because he's like, he says to the cupbearer, he's like, your head will be lifted up and you'll be restored. And then the bread baker, he's like, and your head will be lifted up off your body. You're going to be hung. So they do definitely love wordplay.
For sure.
Awesome.
Love that.
All right. Between now and next week, I'm going to have a bonus video where I cover the people from Seth up into trivia question. What's Noah's dad's name? Terah's Abraham's dad.
It's a short name, isn't it?
It's a pretty short name. Should know it.
Do you know the answer?
I knew the answer.
Okay. He's in 4 or 5, isn't he? No, 7. No.
Lamech.
Lamech.
Because there's the good Lamech and then there's the bad Lamech.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll cover that sort of genealogy and just kind of talk about people. There's one really important person in there. His name's Jared. It's pretty cool. And so we'll do that bonus episode, and then next week we'll be talking about Noah, which is fun.
Woo.
Congratulations, you guys did a podcast.
Woohoo.
Snaps for that. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody. I will see you all in the next video. Bye.